and then we'll get back to you. Okay, I have a bunch of people who want to talk on the Delta Plan in the order in which the presentation was made. Mr. Jennings, you were first, as you were first this morning because you got here at 6:35 a.m., sat down in the line and filled out the forms. Thank you, sir.
I was just eager to see you, Phil. Good afternoon, Chair Eisenberg, council
Jennings,
members.
Mr. DeCroce after you. Mr. Winternitz had to leave, but he's left his letter. Then Mr. Mills. Excuse me.
Bill Jennings, representing California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance, California Water Impact Network, Aqua Alliance. I must say, listening to the discussions, I felt like that I must have fallen through the looking glass. I do want to incorporate the remarks I made this morning into these comments on the Delta Plan without repeating them. And I want to make a point of incorporating remarks that we, our attorneys, made on the EIR that were responded to, but these are comments on the Delta Plan, and I think that the comments from Liz O'Drury, from Steve Volker, from Mike Jackson, there were several comment letters, and from Ralston and Moore, which you already said were comments on the Delta Plan. I want to make sure that they are, in fact, in the record of the Delta Plan. I want to talk about, I mentioned earlier about an artificial reality of being embroiled in the forest and losing, or in the trees and losing sight of the forest. The state board did not provide you a very good answer when you asked them what the sum of water rights were. So we went back and spent 2 years in going through their files, in going through the old adjudications, in sending out myriad Public Records Act requests and going to water agencies. And we compiled that data. And there's 5.5 times the legal rights to water than there is actual water, approximately. And as I mentioned, that by 1901, 1903, the Sacramento and San Joaquin basins were over-appropriated. In fact, if you look in the correspondence between the old Board of Reclamation and the old Water Rights Board, you'll see that they were uncertain that the state Central Valley Project, in fact, they didn't believe the Central Valley Project necessarily had the water, and were recommending adjudication. In fact, Henry Hilsinger, the chief counsel of the Water Rights Board in 1942, wrote a report on the need for a complete adjudication of the Sacramento and San Joaquin basins on behalf of the Central Valley Project. Henry then, when he was chair of the old Water Rights Board, and Earl Warren, just before he was appointed Supreme Court Justice, testified before Claire Engel's Congressional Committee in 1951 that the basins were over-appropriated. They'd long known that, and that an adjudication should occur before operation of the Central Valley Project. Of course, that didn't occur, and about a decade later, the state project came on and was predicated on getting 5 million acre feet of North Coast rivers diverted into the Central Valley, and the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act came along and stopped that. So where did the water come from? Because this is really the source of California's water crisis, and it's really ignored and not discussed or analyzed or acknowledged in your plan. And this is important. And the state in 2010, the legislature directed the state board and the Department of Fish and Wildlife to prepare to go through proceedings and prepare estimates of flows needed to protect public trust resources. And these were big, robust proceedings. I mean, of academia and all of the resource and agencies and I mean, it was a who's who. I mean, Moyle and Kemmer and Bennett and everyone was there. And after this process, they concluded, the state board, that substantial increases. I mean, 75% of delta inflow should be outflow. The San Joaquin River was 60%. The Sacramento was 75% during the 6 months of the year. And the implications of that, again, that is not really, those reports are not really discussed in any detail. You make occasional reference to them. In fact, I don't even think you make a reference to the Department of Fish and Wildlife's biological objectives and flow criteria for the Delta. They went through that long process. And so, but the implications of that is that if Delta outflow increases, where does it come from? Because by the time the projects came online, their water rights are based in the 1927 filings. There was no water. And so where did it come from? And who are you going? You're going to go after the senior upstream appropriators? You're going to go after the junior export appropriators? I mean, where are you going to get it? And how do you have a comprehensive plan to meet the co-equal goals of water supply reliability and restore this estuary if you're not addressing that, if you're not discussing that, if you don't acknowledge that reality, that there's a conundrum there? Because the state board's not going to solve it for you. I mean, the state board's been passing out paper water rights like Bernie Madoff passed out securities. I mean, and people built their lives, mortgaged their futures on that paper water, and that's the problem that we're facing today. But again, how can a Delta plan be seriously, to be valid, be relevant, if it doesn't acknowledge the overappropriation of water and the fact that Delta outflow needs to increase? I mean, that sets up a paradigm of itself. That's like, and the public trust, that's another, almost like the crazy aunt kept locked in the basement at home and no one wants to talk about. I mean, you referred, you look at how many times it's mentioned, but you don't discuss the implications of what the public trust and what public trust balancing implies. I mean, the Audubon decision, the court said that in planning decisions, state agencies, they didn't say the State Water Board, they said state agencies must take the public trust into account. And we, of course, said that we believe you have public trust responsibilities. And in fact, we set forth, we laid out for you in submittals from Eco Northwest and whatnot, how the State Water Board balanced the public trust at Mono Lake. We provided you the manual, the manuals, identified the manuals and guidebooks on how that's accomplished. And you didn't even respond to comments. I mean, you didn't even respond to our comments when we gave you several hundred-page of itemized listing of the water rights that demonstrates the overappropriation of water. So I guess that I see this board. Well, assuming the state board, the phase one, I mean, the hearing the other day was a disaster. I mean, it's a train wreck. The state board's not going to bail you out. You cannot assume that agencies that have failed to comply and enforce the law, that failure is why we have a crisis in California today, are somehow going to experience a Damascus conversion and comply and do the right thing. But you had this golden opportunity. The legislature gave you the opportunity to set forth the standards. You can't enforce them, but you could set that and the performance criteria by which the attainment of those standards could be met, that we could then have a measuring stick and mileposts along the road. And that might have given us a glimmer of hope. And instead, we're looking at a series of 8 lawsuits now in which we're going to decide the future of this estuary, whether we restore it or write its obituary. And I guess that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings.